making this video to talk about my experience where I felt marginalized. I wouldn't have used those words at the time, but in reflection and doing some more reading, that really is how it fits. Where I felt marginalized and almost, I hate to use the word gaslighted casually, but at least dismissed by the eating disorder treatment community, I guess you would say. I um I used to do behaviors that were almost indistinguishable from binge eating disorder, but I had never been formally diagnosed, and I'm not really even sure that the diagnostic criteria existed to make the difference between binge eating disorder and food addiction. If they existed, they certainly weren't widely accessible or used. Um, so I spent a month in an eating disorder treatment center that combined treatment for all eating disorders. We had one person with ARFID, maybe two people, a few anorexics, a couple bulimics. I shouldn't label them as those. A few people with anorexia, some people with ARFID, some people with bulimia, and quite a number of us who were there with what was being called binge eating disorder. And I'm certainly not about to diagnose anybody else who was there. I'm sure at least some of them that label or that diagnosis fits, but it did not fit for me. I was basically self-referred. What had happened was an opening came up. And I guess I'm naming that because I do think it's important if you're not sure whether you have binge eating disorder or food addiction, junk food addiction, processed food addiction. Um, it is good to work with a professional who actually can make that distinction, who actually recognizes both conditions as valid and is able to run through the diagnostic criteria um, to sort out whether you have one or the other or a combination of both. So why am I saying I was marginalized? I was very clear in myself that I had done really, really well. I'd felt good. My food noise had vanished. All of the things I would have wanted for myself in addiction recovery during the 6 month to a year process period where I was whole food plant based. I wasn't eating sugar. I wasn't eating oil. I wasn't eating basically anything processed, let alone ultra processed. Almost everything I made, like the most processed thing was like I was eating whole wheat pasta. I didn't abstain from flour. I mostly abstained from white flour, but I wasn't critically strict about it. And I felt amazing. My body felt great. My mind felt great. It was one of the peak experiences of my life in terms of physical health. And when I got into the eating disorder treatment facility, they dismissed all of that. They called that restrictive eating. They they said that that was they basically, I used the word at the time orthorexia because I was in that container and I was desperate and I was looking for help, and these were the professionals. And so because I was in that environment and because I was desperate and because I was in a lot of pain, I suspended my own truth because they told me I was wrong. And in hindsight, that honestly, I would call that violence, like emotional, psychological violence, because I I knew my truth. I knew it all along. I knew that being there, what I wanted more than anything was to get back to that whole food plant-based way of eating. Because I know it works for me, because I know I felt really good, because I know it was healthy. And I know that ultra processed food isn't food. It's not nourishment. It's not it's products, products. It's things that are dreamt up by food scientists with the whole intention of creating profit. They're not they're not they're not sitting around being like, wouldn't it be great if we could give people more joy and pleasure? No. They're sitting around going, wouldn't it be great if we could add 2% to our bottom line this quarter by introducing a new flavor of whatever processed thing we already make? And so that was one time. And then more recently, just this spring, I was in a breathwork training, and I happened to be partnered with someone who's a therapist who specializes in eating disorders. And oh, I still feel quite tight in myself and like a bit nauseous and quite upset about how dismissive she was. And I really had to own my truth. And because we were just like doing the little preliminary before I would go into a breath work, a breathing exercise, we didn't have a lot of time to unpack it, and I certainly didn't want to get into any kind of discussion or argument about, the truth, I guess. But I just remember at one point I was saying, yeah, the thing I want to focus on, my intention with this session is to unravel my food addiction. And she said something like, oh, okay, so I know that people who refer to their, she's like, oh, that's really great because I actually specialize in eating disorders. And I know that for people who use that terminology of food addiction, such. I don't remember even what she said after that because I just got so caught up on like who use that phrase as though we're talking about the same thing and that I'm just using a different word for it, and it's not the same thing. Binge eating disorder is a thing. Uh, as far as I can tell, it stems from people who recovered, or who, I don't even say recovered really, who had suffered from restrictive eating disorders like anorexia or bulimia, and who now were swinging the other way into binge eating. And it still has this um, idea that like some foods are bad, like immoral, like unethical, that they are bad if they eat them, that they're not allowed to eat them. And that's a very different situation than someone who knows in themselves, you know what, I feel better when I don't eat this food. I do better. My food noise drops. And that's how it is with me and, say, potato chips and ice cream in the house and ultra processed um, snacks. Really, really any ultra processed snacks. And most ultra processed foods, like meal foods. I'm just kind of taking a moment now because that, even just remembering that thing more recently, because I have a lot of feelings about the message I received at the eating disorder place. I do believe that my time there and the messages I received set my recovery back. I don't know how long, months, years, because it wasn't the right advice for me. All foods fit was not what I needed to learn. Food neutrality was not what I needed to learn. I didn't think that junk food was bad, like immoral, like I just it's it's not food. It's no more food than marijuana is air, or um what would you say, that tobacco is air. Like they're not food, they're substances that consume in order to change your state. Anyways, I just want to let people know that if you know in your heart that cutting out certain foods is what you need to do, do not let anybody convince you otherwise. I mean, I shouldn't say that. If you've had a history with anorexia, if you've had a history with severe dieting where you've restricted, foods that, all foods, like anything that tasted good or something, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a therapist. I'm not a diagnostician. But if you know in your heart that what you're dealing with is food addiction, that you don't need to eat certain foods for your optimal health, and you're still getting enough calories and you're still getting all your, fats and carbs and proteins and in the amounts that are appropriate for your own body, and you can experiment with that yourself. Don't let the eating disorder world dismiss you, because you deserve to have your truth acknowledged. Thanks. That's all I have to say today.